Hey, it's Monday, a new week of BBC programming. Once again, I'm Brent Leary, and I have to say, it's not that BBC, it's the Brent Broadcasting Channel. I don't want to get any, international troubles, by playing off of the other one, but no, this is the Brent Broadcasting Channel. And once again, this is another week of. I think I'm going to be doing something every week. It's just a lot of great folks to talk to and topics to talk about. And today is definitely no exception. Actually, you probably have seen Anand with me before because he's been on a couple of times. And then they actually invited me on when they were doing this really great podcast. Well, I guess it's a podcast, so you didn't see me, but it was a great podcast. What was that called over at MarTech Advisor? What was the name of that podcast?
Talking Stack.
Talking Stack.
Clever name. Love it.
It was a nice name. And, David Rabb was one of your co-hosts, and Chitra Ayer was another one of the co-hosts. He was like the host and the moderator. And that was just great conversations. And so we had a chance to talk all the time. You used to be in Atlanta. You're still close by. So I feel like you're still, the spirit of you is still here with us. So good to see you, man. Good to talk with you.
It's great to see you. Thanks for inviting me back. And it's great to always have a conversation with you about anything in the space, except for the Rams, because I really don't know a lot about the Rams, to be honest. So, but, you can talk, I can listen and learn.
The only thing that, that you would have a problem with me is if you're a Patriots fan. So if you're not a Patriots fan, we're good, man.
I think we're safe there.
Bob Fagel, I hope you're out there, and I hope you heard that. Okay. So no, you're a guy I always turn to when it comes to MarTech, EdTech. I mean, you helped build the MarTech landscape. How many was the last one? It was like over 7,000 companies on that thing the last time.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't worked on it for a couple of years. Partly, I was in the midst of an acquisition of our company, and then there was just family stuff. But for about 2.5 years, I guess, 2 years officially. Wow. Yeah, that was by the time I was done with, my last tenure was about 7,000 some odd companies, and then I think it's up to 8 now. So. But it's becoming one of those things where it's less about the number, right? We know there's just a lot of technology out there, but to what degree is there a movement in the space and understanding a lot of that? And so that's part of the reason we, try to help Scott. He's done Scott Brinker, of course, if for those of you know, the godfather of MarTech, and he's an incredible guy, humble individual, loves and is incredibly passionate about the space. I think he loves it more or as much as one of his children, but he's definitely someone to follow and certainly listen to what he has to say. It's more about, because even the 8,000 that's on these landscapes, it's still not covering the entire scope of what MarTech means, and it's certainly a different challenge. It's sort of a different view into the world. As I tell people, the reason I got into MarTech, because it was a view, it was sort of a microscope or a scope into a lens, into the world of business or the future of business, amongst other things. I tell people I'm the intersection of people, data, and money, and that can cross over to business, politics, just society in general. I mean, it takes so many different things, but it's an interesting space to be in.
So this is, we've been trying to have this conversation for a while, so I'm glad we were able to do it.
That's right.
I'm actually kind of glad it came about now instead of before, because a couple of different things have happened. One thing I want to talk to you about, but just to lay the groundwork. So I knew you, I think I became aware of you when you were still at Salesforce, but you were at Salesforce because Salesforce acquired ExactTarget for $2.5 billion. And before that, like not even all that long before that, you were at Pardot, and Pardot got acquired by ExactTarget for about 100 million. So you've been involved going way back. And then of course you worked at a couple of other different marketing automation companies. You had your own company. You just talked about it being acquired. So, and then you were an investor. You just do a lot of stuff in this space. So it's great to talk to you about this stuff.
Yeah, no, I mean, to just interject, I mean, I've worked with Salesforce and I've worked closely with Pardot, but I never really ended up, I just around, right? So I think you knew me when I was just floating in the behind the scenes, the shadow of the space. At the time, I was actually working at Silverpop. No, actually, I had just left Silverpop. We had accomplished what we needed to do. And then I was on my own doing some consulting. And I think we were introduced by Mr. Kyle Porter over at SalesLoft.
Oh,
at one of the at Dreamforce, as a matter of fact. So,
okay.
Partly because we were both from Atlanta, all the way out the other side of the world, and then you know,
Right.
he just
funny.
yeah.
Were you at what was the other? Not this Pop. What was Silverpop?
Silverpop.
So you were at
Yeah.
Silverpop before they got bought by IBM, or
I was there before they got bought, right?
Okay.
Yeah, my charter there in terms of marketing operations was to help transform the way that we did things internally, and then kind of reposition it for growth in a sense. And I had a great boss, and I was probably a terrible manager, but we managed we managed to do some good work, and then some of the folks that picked up from where I left off had done incredible job. So it's but yeah, I mean, so many solar poppers permeated throughout the space. I mean, the last time that something like that happened was Eloqua. But yeah, good times, and certainly keep in touch with most of those folks there.
You're like, if a company wants to get acquired, bring Anand in and have him work there for a little while, because eventually that company will get acquired. Silverpop, IBM, Pardot, Exact Target. You did a double on that one, so it went from Pardot to Exact Target, from Exact Target to Salesforce.
Yeah, I learned a lot while I was watching things from Pardot, and certainly supporting the local, because Pardot was headquartered in Atlanta, right? And it was one of the few MarTech companies that pretty much were in the area doing their thing. It was a bootstrapped company by David Cummings and Adam Blitzer. So we'll probably bring Adam back into the conversation a little bit later, considering. But two incredible, co-founders with a bunch of incredible team members. I mean, they adopted a lot of the same principles without actually having to do it on the West Coast. And it was an incredible story that they were acquired by Exact Target, and then Exact Target got picked up by Salesforce. So I couldn't really buy Pardot stock or equity beforehand. No one would let me. And so I was like, all right, they got bought by Exact Target. Day of, go buy some Exact Target. And then shortly thereafter, Salesforce were picking things up. But yeah, like I said, I was talking about this earlier. Movement in the space is so incredibly interesting. The narrative on that alone is awesome. And having a little bit of a financial markets background, this is probably more my sweet spot in terms of watching the entire MarTech space, and the talent side and the leadership side of things, just as much as the technology and how they piece together.
Nice. And it was just good to see Atlanta representing. I like to see Atlanta represent. And that's funny because let me take this off from Alan. We'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
It was interesting because, a lot of people don't know that Atlanta was and especially back then, was a pretty hotbed for marketing automation, because it wasn't just Pardot, it wasn't just Silverpop. There were a couple of other ones. I know. What's that company? It's a marketing. No,
there's Sales Fusion. That
Sales
was another
Fusion,
one. Yeah,
they took it because of the name. Sales Fusion,
they took a different approach. Quick commentary on that. I mean, they took a different approach. They said, look, why just have marketing automation for just marketing? Why not bring marketing and sales together? And of course, they were way ahead of its time. So,
right. And then
people didn't figure that out until later on when the whole ABM thing came around. But then, then we had,
and then, of course, they got bought by Sugar.
That's right. They did. Then we had Core Motives and Click Dimensions were both on the Microsoft side of things, and they were competing on that front for marketing automation, which really wasn't very prevalent in the the Microsoft ecosystem for a while. There was people who were getting into it, but primarily a lot of folks were in the e-commerce side of things. It didn't feel like marketing automation was as valuable to them as, unfortunately, Batch and Blast was at the time. And then people got smart to it, and both Click and Core Motives was picked up by Silverpop. Some nice local action there, and then Click Dimensions is thriving. It's still out of Atlanta, but yeah, a lot of marketing automation talent, a lot of marketing technology talent out of Atlanta. I actually ran this tool just to see how we fared. called Spark Toro by Rand Fishkin. If you know Rand, he's
Oh
Mr.
yeah.
Moz, SEO, SEM, anything search. And he, I was like, who's having conversations about marketing technology? And of course, Boston, #1, and then there's New York and Toronto, and then a couple, and then
We did.
Atlanta still made the top like 5 list, right?
I know.
We're in there. We're in there.
I'm glad we're in there, but Boston being #1 is just, it hurts my heart. I just had to get that out of there. All right, we got a lot of good comments coming in, and with your background, this is perfect setup because last week on CRM Players Weekly, me and Paul, we had a really actually, was that last week? It was. Yeah, I think it was last. I'm doing so many of these things. It's like I'm kind of losing count. But we did have on one of our buddies in a industry thought leader, Jesus Hoyos, on, and he talked a little bit about marketing automation and maybe one of the biggest challenges about marketing automation, particularly during a pandemic. I'm gonna play a clip for you so that you could get it, and then I want to get your feedback on the other side of the clip.
Absolutely.
All right, here we go. It's always scary when I go to the clip because I don't know what's going to happen. All right, let's see if we get it.
Marketing automation is based on using only one email. We don't have one email today. And the whole data model for marketing automation, when you bring that into CRM, they don't go together. And when you move from CRM to onboarding, the same thing. We're everywhere, So, we have multiple phone numbers, we have more than one address. So that right now, because we need to, be closer because of the coronavirus to the customer, it needs to be really defined. And, we thought probably, privacy and GDPR and preference centers are going to bring that, or whatever is called the customer cloud, the customer 360. But it's not really well defined within the technology and the processes.
All right, let me bring you back in. So that was just last week, and I thought Jesus made some really interesting points about, those challenges are already there with the data model being kind of broken, but the impact of that brokenness during a pandemic and trying to engage customers and keep up with where they are today and what their needs are going to be tomorrow. That challenges seem to have been deepened and exacerbated, I guess, because of what's going on. What do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, I think Jesus is, if you have a chance to just sit down and listen to the guy, you just love listening to everything he says, whatever he says or whatever he talks about. But, if you listen carefully to what he was talking about is that, the way that things were built were very much somewhat antiquated. And if we're talking about, and it's not just so that that's not the technology again, right? This is never about the technology being a limitation. It's more of the way that we want to implement it and how we want it to magnify the technology that's out there. So, you hear me say it like 15 times a day, right? Is that technology only magnifies who we are. So if we're bad at what we're doing, guess what? We're going to use the technology or misuse it and vice versa. I think what he was talking about with regards to one email address, I thought really resonated with me because there's another problem especially in the B2B space, where it's not only just one person, but one email for one person, but then you also have one assumed decision maker per company. So in a B2B capacity, if you had 5 different people at a particular company and they all downloaded your white paper or did different things to end up in your CRM database or marketing automation database, how do you rectify that? That's one of the biggest challenges behind the scenes that people didn't really talk about, and probably one of the main reasons that marketing operations became like an incredibly thriving profession is how do you resolve these types of things that aspirationally the marketing these technologies have asked us to embrace. So I think that he certainly has a point, and this is part of the reason I think we should probably start looking at databases that connect these different places. And I think a lot of people have heard, especially listening in, about customer database or customer data platform, CDPs. And so one of the benefits of that is you're really trying to get a full, what we used to call the 360 view of the customer, right? And this is the opportunity for a brand to own the customer and the customer experience, starting from again, another point that Jesus made was about clean data. Having clean data, part of the reason we don't have clean data is not necessarily through laziness or challenges with the experience of trying to ingest that data in from third parties, but it's also, we find a big challenge in having that data spread. I mean, we have challenges in terms of data being in the different technologies. So how do we centralize that information when we actually need to do it? And so I think another piece that Jesus was I think could lead to in that conversation was privacy and AI. When you do have to deal with that in a plethora of, let's say your stack of technologies related to the customers, 18 to 30 some odd pieces of technology, how are you able to even respect, even if you wanted to, how do you even respect the customer's wishes on their privacy? Or how do you apply AI in a grander scope of things that would help you, navigate what that really respects? But Brent, I mean, what do you think that, Jesus was kind of, I didn't hear the part before that, but what led up to the conversation where he was bringing that up? I think it was a interesting note that he brought up, but it must have been inspired from something from before.
Well, I think it's inspired by the fact that it's hard to communicate, meaningfully communicate with customers, generally speaking, because of some of the issues around the technology and because the data model is kind of broken and spread out, and you can't really, there's no one channel anymore to interact with customers. So when you have kind of a bad data model and a broken communication system, this is all drives even more problems. And it kind of talks about let me see, is this, let me put this up there because I think this kind of plays into a bit. If we already had issues going into the pandemic with communication, and maybe the technology is part of that reason, but it's not the full reason. I think there's a lot of broken stuff to be spread out. Yeah, the technology right now, the foundation of how we built our customer engagement is spread out. It's disparate. It's kind of hard to bring it all together. It's kind of hard to make sense of whatever the interactions are because they're coming in from all over the place. So there's a technology problem. But let's take the technology problem out of it. There's still a big, I think, a big issue with a lot of companies because because they just don't. They're looking at things from their perspective. They're looking at how do we, get people to buy more stuff, and not necessarily looking at it from the customer's perspective. So let's face it, they could have the greatest technology, they could have the greatest platform, they could have all the data coming in, they could have their AI running and finding all these great insights. And if they don't deliver those insights in a meaningful way, in a way that will be empathetic and will connect the dots to the customer, all that stuff is for naught.
Yep.
So I think that's where we are. And to take it one step further, this is really what I want to get to with you. So we know, and I've talked to a number of companies, I'm sure you have. There are a lot of folks who just cut the spigot off when it came to doing any kind of marketing, ad campaigns, marketing campaign, cut it off completely just because of the uncertainty in the environment. So the interesting thing about that is not that they did it because everybody was kind of scared, and you're starting to see some, some life coming back to that. But I've been having some really interesting conversations about some. I'm not going to say who, but there are vendors who said, "Yeah, we cut it out." And guess what? We're doing all right. We're not going to be going back to what we were doing before. We're not going to be spending that money the way we were spending it before. And I have a suspicion that the few companies that I talk to, they are just representative of what I think is going to be happening on the other side. So what's going to happen if that's the case? If all this programmatic stuff that was going on before the pandemic, got cut off, things may be coming back, but at some point they're going to come back. But it seems to me that there's a movement from a lot of these companies who spent a lot of money and did a lot of this programmatic stuff. They might be not coming back anywhere near where they left off. Are you hearing anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're seeing it on a couple of fronts. I mean, COVID shook a lot of things up. There's a lot of certainly allyship in different arenas that that brands are needing to be very aware of at the very least, and very actionable on how they do things. And the old models don't support a lot of those purposeful missions moving forward. Let me roll back a little bit, because on the front of talking about programmatic advertising and what that means, or excuse me, like in terms of businesses actually cutting off marketing, or just cutting out marketing, or cutting out advertising, I think a lot of times there's a lot of opportunity to just do things regardless whether it's the highest performing, because you've got to do them. You've got to spend. You're going to budget this. What everybody else is doing, you have the fear of missing out. Oh my gosh, if I saw, like, think about it like billboards or TV ads, or let's say Super Bowl commercials. People have this fear of missing out because, oh man, my competitor did a Super Bowl commercial, therefore we should strive to do something similar. Well, we don't live in that kind of world today. There's not a limited channel of ways to engage with a customer anymore. And those things start to change. And many companies that I've talked to, or have heard from, or learn about as I hear about, they try to take one channel and think that's the silver bullet, rather than trying to diversify into a portfolio. So I think for companies who are cutting out the people who are, let's say, marketing departments. I mean, one of the things I've been striving for, and I mean, you kind of know this, I've been working intensely with companies for the last 8-9 months now, trying to navigate them through the COVID or any crisis, some of those crisis situations. And, one of the first things is, marketing, yes or no. And that's not the right question to ask. That correct question is the marketing efforts or spend that you have, are they engaged in building a relationship with a customer? And if it's not part of the journey, or if they're not responsible for the entire journey back into the business operations of the company, then yeah, maybe you need to consider cutting it, because it's an expensive spend, and you're basically competing. You're selling against yourself. You spend $1, someone spends $1.05, then you got to spend $1.10, then they spend more, and then you have to spend more. But if your marketing spend is basically driven on developing a deeper relationship, meaning you are training your staff, frontline staff perhaps, at a retail store on developing better experiences, or you're working on the digital journey for how people buy, or trying to come up with different ways to help your customers make a decision, or help them, say, like in a fintech world, like you have some sort of financial services option, you're trying to help them be better financially savvy. If you're doing those types of things and the customer feels like you're helping them through that, that's whether they buy from you or not, they become those advocates. And I think that's where that's the part where you can elevate across your other competitors by sitting there and focusing on that. A lot of people say that, but they're talking about limited to the digital spend, but there's a lot of pieces beyond the digital ad. And I think that's what a lot of companies are doing, Brent, is they're looking at all the the grand scope of things and saying, wow, really ads aren't bringing the conversion rates we're looking for, or perhaps aren't giving us the awareness that we're really hoping for. But I think a lot of that will change over time, and everyone will evolve. I'm always a believer that people and companies will evolve because either they need to or they go away.
Well, that's like Darwinism right there.
That's it's at its finest
right there. But I think Rolf has mentioned it, you mentioned it, I mentioned it, I'm sure Alan mentioned it, unless he's still talking about the Jets or something. But the whole idea of empathy, and what I've noticed, the programmatic stuff, there is absolutely no empathy involved. That's just pure. We know data, we know where you've been, and we're going to follow you and hound you wherever you go on the web. And you see pop-ups, and it's like just ridiculous, and it makes you not want to buy anything. So there's zero. I mean, they did a lot of work on the analytics. They did a lot of data aggregation. They've been looking at the insight, knowing where you're going to go. That's great. Right. Zero empathy when in the actual activity, in the action. And I think that is driving people crazy. And that's why I think you're seeing folks, because in the pandemic, the thing that you need most is empathy in order to show folks, like you said, that they care, and that you're creating an interaction that is based off of not just data, but it's based off of data and delivered in an empathetic way that lets people understand that you care. Right. And I think that's where I think there's an opportunity for a shift in some of this budget away from just pure programmatic, pure analytics, pure, retarget, and to have to do a little bit more work, which requires you to really understand, not just know where you're going or know where they're going, but to understand why, and then to create an interaction opportunity that takes that into consideration so that you don't spend all your time and effort, and money on pure analytics and understanding without being able to deliver that understanding in an empathetic way.
I agree. And, the reason I tend to hesitate using empathy in some of these conversations is because we don't define that well, right? I think that's one of the problems is we don't say what it is that we're doing to be empathetic. We're like, for example, I mean, you're training your frontline staff to be your team members to, better serve their customers, or you're trying to, find a better, an easier way for people to pay for their merchandise online, or you're trying to understand how to elevate someone's profession. I mean, I think if you're going to use the word empathy, then you need to say exactly what you're trying to accomplish, at least one thing that's more specific than just saying, oh yeah, we're going to be empathetic. That's the kind of crap that gets all these companies in trouble is they go find a lot of these empathy consultants, and then guess what they're asking you to do too. And there's a lot of good ones out there. And you know what they're going to tell you? They're going to say, what are you doing that makes you empathetic or more empathetic than someone else? So I agree. Empathy, certainly Rolf is correct. You're correct. I mean, empathy is a magic word, as Rolf was saying, but until you actually define what that is for your company specifically, actionable, like what those actionable steps will look like, or what's the goal look like, you're not going to get anywhere, right? And we've seen some matters come up where people are like, oh, well, you just changed your logo and put out like a press release and you think you're done, and it's not, right? You have to do more than that, to make that magic happen.
Yeah, but here's the thing: they have resources. They have spent a ton of resources on. I mean, and I don't want to make light of the amount of effort and finances it takes to identify where your customers are engaging and integrate into those channels and get that data in and analyze that data and understand that data and try to find insights that will impact at that time, at the right time. That's a ton of work. It's a ton of money. It takes a ton of effort. But why go through all that and then fumble when you actually go to address that person?
Right.
If you haven't spent a little time, a little effort, it doesn't have to be this like a 50-50 split here, but it does have to have. You have to spend some time not only understanding, but then how do we best communicate our understanding? How do we best communicate that insight? So that when we do, interact with somebody, they're more likely to understand where we're coming from and that we're on their side and we're trying to deliver some value for them at the time they need it. That's all I'm saying. I'm not, I think,
no. And the, measurable way to look at that, this is just back of the napkin kind of thing, is look at retention, right? How many people are you keeping as customers if you're in this, subscription-based world? How many people are advocates of yours, like active advocates, not just liking something on, one of the social media platforms. I'm talking about they are out there selling on your behalf. They're proud to be part of your company as a result of things. And then the third piece would be, how easy has it been to recruit, right? So if a company is doing a great job of having empathy, and it's being well demonstrated, you'll see people come in that want to work for you. And maybe it's a little skewed today because COVID is going to cause a lot of shuffle in terms of talent opportunities and opportunities for jobs, just period. But still, I mean, how many of the best talent is coming your way as opposed to you having to pull them in and try to recruit them at like the highest price possible because you're struggling in some capacity. So think about it from a recruiting standpoint, an advocate standpoint, and a retention standpoint. Those will give you clues about how well your empathy is working.
Speaking of empathy, you're right, Alan. I didn't even pop up that comment because I have no empathy for your Jets. Sorry about that. All right. So, but I do like your question here. And so, Anand, would you like to tackle what Alan's asking here?
Yeah, there's I honestly, I don't have necessarily the best advice out there about this. I'll be honest with you. I think it's one of those things that if you were a company that was advocating for these things, have internalized these things, you're probably, you'll hear that's going to be, you'll see that happen to be very natural cause throughout the community, especially on social, especially as you see it on play out in social media. But I think there's a lot of people who are. This is a grand opportunity for people to really listen. And I think that a lot of people want to say something because they feel compelled to do so, but they're not really spending time to listen. And I think admitting that a lot of brands who can admit that maybe we're not fully aware, or we're not doing it, you listen and then you bring up some actionable steps. Again, I think the magic word is really actionable. Like, what are you planning on doing, and how are you going to hold yourself accountable? Like, who are you going to find to hold yourself accountable for it? So those are some very high level things. I mean, I think tactically speaking, I don't have any necessarily. I probably would look to someone else who's certainly a brand expert, like Katie Martell. She's a favorite of mine in the arena. She does some incredible work in terms of how people are kind of faking their allyship in terms of brands who are trying to kind of fake their allyship. I think she also has a very keen understanding of brands that do a good job, why they do a good job, and how they're transforming internally to make that work. So I certainly would, if you're following anybody, I'd certainly look to her as one of the people to certainly do so. And there's multitudes of people out there to certainly do that. But I think if you are to be genuine, you actually have to show change, or understand that you're listening. And I know that is very difficult for a lot of brands to be able to do, not because they don't want to, but it's just there's a responsibility to a lot of people, right? Their employees, their shareholders, the community at large. It's not easy. So you're in good company.
Definitely not easy. Yeah, it's definitely not easy. And there are some who want to do it but don't know how to do it. But let's be honest, there's some who don't want to do it and don't care too.
That's right. That's right.
Can't leave those out. And Rolf, don't worry about the typos. We just love the comments and the questions.
Yes, absolutely.
Keep bringing them in.
I'm one of the worst speller. I can't. So I'll admit something. Like, in the world of technology, and you can ask Brent this, right? I can't. I'm all on thumbs when it comes to what you're supposed to be with texting, but I can't type worth a crap. So I don't care. We can read past that.
Yeah, it's all right. We don't need you typing. Just talking is good. All right. So
Thank goodness.
Gonna get into let's get into some numbers. We talked a little bit about some of the softer things, still important, but let's talk about some of the kind of the more concrete things. And I want to bring this up because this kind of got a lot of attention. At least it got a lot of attention for CRM plays. Let's put it like that. So a couple weeks ago, Salesforce did their analyst event, virtual analyst event, and this is one of the slides that they broke out. All right, there's a couple of different things to look at here, but I'm going to kind of focus on one. All right, well, I'll just mention a couple. Like, first, I think this is the first quarter that Service Cloud overtook Sales Cloud in terms of revenue. But look at, the platform thing is taking everything over, which is really interesting. But what I wanted to focus on and get your take on, of course, is the Marketing Cloud and the Commerce Cloud thing right there. So 700 million combined Marketing Cloud and Commerce Cloud for that last quarter of theirs. Interesting number because it's like the week or two before that number came out, Adobe had put their earnings out, and they have Creative Cloud, which is their big moneymaker, right? Still by far their big moneymaker. They got Document Cloud, which is definitely third in their big three, but the second one is their Experience Cloud, and that pretty much is marketing and commerce driven. Their quarter was 826 million. And so I was like, interesting. So Adobe is actually caught up and passed. I don't know if caught up, but they definitely passed Marketing Cloud and Commerce Cloud combination that Salesforce has. Hey, are you surprised by that? Or is that something you've been thinking is going to happen, or what should we make out of that?
I think that this is to be expected, but I think we'll see it back and forth, right? I mean, I think we'll see, higher growth, putting relative numbers, like specific numbers aside. I mean, we're talking about relative growth. We're going to see going back and forth. And, I think we've talked about this before. I don't think we talked about it online, but we did have a conversation about it with Magento being picked up by Adobe, and a significant part of that conversation was how close can you get to the money that's being spent, right? So we're talking about the transaction itself, and and the B2C, the commerce side of things is will become the hotter thing. And the other thing too is I think we're going to see who can leverage their ecosystem really well. I'm talking about partners and customers and all the advocates within their community, as we talked about before. But also, which they're both powerful, right? Adobe's incredibly powerful, so is Salesforce. The other piece will be we're going to see a lot of new businesses crop up, whether they're high growth startups or whether they're just mom and pop shops. With COVID shaking a lot of things up, so we're going to see. I think generally speaking, we're going to see a lot of that grow in that capacity. But I don't necessarily see it as a surprise. I mean, Adobe's been focused on marketing for a long time relative to Salesforce. Salesforce has been in it, has a good tenure in it. I know one of the chiefs behind that front, and I guarantee you, honestly, I missed the opportunity to work for him one day, and it's one of my small regrets. But he's an incredibly intelligent, wise guy, and interesting individual who sees things in a very holistic manner. So I see that that can really play out. And of course, I know people at Adobe at high levels too, and they're it's funny, they're going into the B2B side, and we're seeing Salesforce move into the B2C cloud. So I think it's a natural course of action, and probably a healthy one for all of us to have those types of options.
Well, I think just looking at the commerce part of it, because to me that's where everything's at right now. And you mentioned Adobe's been more B2C focused, moving towards B2B. Of course, Salesforce bought Demandware and they bought Crowd Queries, and so B2B, they're converging basically. They're kind of converging. They're going to be encroaching on each other's kind of sweet spots. But with COVID and with that overnight switch that people had to go from shopping the traditional way to buying online because they weren't allowed to leave their house. Does that provide Adobe more of a growth opportunity for commerce than Salesforce at this point?
Yeah, that's a fair question. I think that it may or may not in this stage, because it really depends on who can empower a small business and small medium-sized business that will survive COVID and or starting new and have that growth trajectory. I mean, Salesforce's rise to fame has been revolved around no software. That was the beginning, right? And that's where Benioff started off. And he's a highly technical individual, more than as much as he is a very high gravitas leader. But the rise in all of that has been working with startups, small businesses. How do we make things easier for them? And now, enterprises are using them. So whoever can win the small, medium-sized business world, that's where I think the winner, I guess if there was to be a winner, that's where the winning will happen, especially in a post-COVID situation. This was already happening with the commerce side even before, with all the acquisitions, COVID's just like everything else is accelerating that kind of digital, engagement and transaction that's happening in there. So, and I wouldn't be surprised that they're going to be nipping at the heel. Like there's going to be other companies nipping at the heels for them as well, on both fronts. So it'll be interesting to see who the new players that will come into play, that will come into the light, that start to push on the Salesforces and the Adobes and their product base, and how are they changing the way that that type of interaction is done, or how do they enable these businesses or solopreneur founders who are starting new businesses to simplify their operations so they just get going and start selling right away, as opposed to worrying about piecing their stack together and what that looks like and how pretty that might look.
Yeah, no, I it's going to be fascinating to watch, because as commerce becomes e-commerce, digital commerce, wherever you want to put it, becomes more a part of the customer engagement, stuff.
Right.
It's not CRM, but it is part of their customer engagement platform. And all the big guys are doing that. Mm-hmm. It'll be really fascinating to see just how much of the activity, the interest is going to be coming through that angle, and how much of the B2B aspects of commerce starts to really be transformed and be more and more digital. As we're looking at having touchless everything to a certain extent.
So Brent, do you feel like, I mean, you come from the CRM side of things. I mean, I always talked about the fact that one day we'll just be talking about the same stuff, no regardless whether it's CRM or marketing related, and I think we're almost there, right? But where do you see? I mean, is the notion of CRM changing in this new dynamic past COVID? And if the push into commerce is occurring, how does that look differently than, say, from a marketing perspective or sales perspective versus a marketing perspective?
So, I mean, the traditional pillars of CRM with sales automation, marketing automation, and service. And sales automation has basically been around B2B, around helping, folks who are selling, traditionally it was face-to-face selling, but, not just commerce in terms of consumers, in terms of, people going to get a Coke or something like that, but, selling big stuff to big companies or, middle stuff to middle companies, or, you're just selling, which is a completely different process traditionally than if you're just trying to sell somebody, something for their home or for their car or whatever. That's all being transformed. That was going on before COVID.
Mm-hmm.
I think COVID just accelerates, like you were saying.
Yeah.
COVID kind of reveals who you are and what you are, but it also amplifies and accelerates what you are, unless you know what you need to do in order to change that. I think there's a lot of companies that are just kind of starting to realize that they should have been changing that before COVID, but now COVID is accelerating all of that stuff, including how they sell and how they, set their sales processes up. So yeah, CRM is just like any other aspect of business. It's got to change in order to meet the changing expectations of the customer and the journeys that they're looking to take. So yeah, and that's why commerce is impacting CRM probably more than vice versa, because
right.
if your business process is being transformed digitally, that means it's going through a whole different chain and channel than it was previously. So the people that were responsible for your selling, they're going to have to change in order to fit that. So I think it's just huge, and it's going to be, things that are taking place now because of COVID. They're going to be a significant amount of it is going to be around after COVID. It's not going back to what it used to be. I'm not saying the new normal. I'll just say the next normal, because there's always going to be some kind of change to what normal is, and then it becomes normal again. So, so yeah, that it's fascinating to see everything that's taking place. And I want to ask you about one last thing.
Yeah,
this is a perfect setup, because when you think of CRM, you really, over the last 2 decades, the folks driving it has been Salesforce.
Mm-hmm.
And a funny thing happened on the way to all that driving, something that I definitely didn't think was going to happen before. Salesforce is actually bigger in terms of market cap than Oracle. Now, I mean, that blew my mind when I first saw this. I posted it up, and people are, yeah. What was your take on this?
I'll be honest, like it's come sooner than I thought. There's a notion where, Oracle certainly plays in a lot of the back office, not much of the front office, and traditionally, but now has, certainly emerged themselves into the front office, particularly with, say, acquisitions like Eloqua and some of the other ones. But this doesn't surprise me, because I think the brand really does play a big role here. The who you're advocating for, the sense of purpose. I mean, a year after Mark Benioff started Salesforce, he started a foundation to say, we're going to give 1%, 111, which is 1% of revenue, 1% of our time, and 1% of, I apologize, I don't remember the last part, but it's, the software itself. Yeah. The software. Right. So right. If you're, a foundation, I mean, he's had the idea of building the community for a long time, developer community, the high growth startup community, so he's stayed focused and in his lane for CRM for sales. It's funny. I think there's a history there where Larry Ellison said, well, I was invested in NetSuite, and we were kind of going down that track for, the financial side. But sales enablement, sales was a big component of it, but I don't see this to be, too shocking. Particularly because it is very easy to get up and running in Salesforce. It doesn't take a lot of effort, doesn't take a lot of time. We talked about small, medium-sized businesses. Who wins that is going to start to win in the long run. Here we go, right? There is a sense of you eventually have to be robust enough to be able to adhere to the enterprise, but that can come later. So a lot of high growth is coming here. But yeah, I think Mark Benioff's done a great job of diversifying, seeing and recognizing the cloud, even though that's not what he called it back then, right? He called it software as a service. I think platform as a service. I can't remember if he did the whole IaaS as well, but that seems to be a regular theme, but done an incredible job on that front. And, Larry's been catching up. But, to some point, Larry Ellison should be very proud of Mark. I mean, he worked under Mark, and he'd be like, "Hey, you told me you were going to, basically overcome or eclipse me," as this article pointed out, and he's done that. So sometimes, you've done a great job of mentoring, and you see it in real time there.
Well, the thing about it is, you think about it. Not only did Mark come out of Oracle and created Salesforce. I mean, Larry had his hand in Siebel. Yep. Larry had his hand in there's like three early on. Well, Siebel was an on-prem, but there was Salesforce, there was NetSuite, and I can't remember. I think it was Right Now Technologies that were right. They all came out around late '90s, early 2000s for cloud-based CRM. I mean, NetSuite was more like accounting and stuff, and Right Now is more customer service. But Salesforce is more SFA, so they kind of all fit in. But Larry was an early investor in NetSuite. Mm-hmm. He was an early investor in Salesforce. Yep. They had something else called SalesNet, and I think Oracle ended up buying that at some point.
That's right.
So Larry really had a big part in Salesforce's success in general. Specifically, but CRM, cloud-based CRM, generally speaking, to the point where Salesforce has been able to show just how valuable cloud-based customer relationship management is, to the point where it's more valuable than all the stuff that Oracle does. Now, it just seems a little strange to me, but because, I mean, think about database software. I mean, it was only like 3 or 4 years ago that database software was still the number one enterprise software. And now it's like CRM is actually the number one. It's amazing to me.
I remember when I was working for a company, small business company, and small, medium-sized business company in the energy space. And we were there was a colleague of mine. She actually introduced me into to Salesforce, and I was looking at it. And we went into a meeting, and the executives were like, "Oh, this Salesforce thing is just databases with a sales label on it. So like, what's the big deal about that?" But so here's why I think that this is another big factor is Salesforce has incredible extensibility. They built around making sure that people could augment and improve their instance of Salesforce to the best practices they needed, versus Oracle, who's taken the position of we've got all of it integrated under one roof. So who do you think is going to win? And there's benefits and there's pitfalls and benefits to both sides. The extensibility creates lots of integration problems, potential costs on that front. But then, with the all-in-one system, do you really get the best of what you need? How much extra, customization is going to be required? But, in the long run, the iPhone, right? We're talking about like Amazon. I mean, extensibility wins in the long run because we've kind of evolved from just requiring just an instance of something, bringing it in, and then just having services do that. So for now, that's another reason why I think Salesforce has grown so fast and then continues to grow in that capacity. Microsoft took the same mindset shift where we will own the world and we will bring everything under our world, to now we're going to partner with people who do stuff better than we do, right? And how much has Microsoft, as a side point, increased? So extensibility and empowering your customers and the people within the community to make things better. It's a great growth mechanism to bring more advocates that will help you make the product better.
Actually, I think too, you got to give them credit for Trailblazer and that whole community of developers. It fit the platform, moved to talking about being a platform, and then creating this very successful educational channel around getting developers on the platform and using the platform. And I mean, that was like Microsoft back in the days of
That's
Windows
right.
and
That's right.
Visual Basic. I mean, they had this. Oracle had that Oracle Developer Network. SAP had their huge networks,
Which was good
but
too.
they were aimed purely at the technical folks.
Correct.
Whereas what
Right.
Salesforce did is, because you're talking about CRM, you're aiming at a different audience, and I don't think anybody did what they did, creating this training arm and this platform for training that's integrated into what their general platform. I don't think anybody else did that. Aim their stuff right at the business people who get what CRM was supposed to do.
Yeah, sometimes it's easier to start from scratch later down the line, right? When things have changed.
That's true.
So we were emerging into the world where people could do these things themselves, right? That was pretty the value proposition of Salesforce is, you can create views the way you want, you can create reports the way you want. You don't need an IT person to help you with that. I mean, that was literally in the minds of how Salesforce, went about things, and actually much of MarTech as well is like, we want marketers to use these tools, not IT folks necessarily. And interestingly enough, that's probably a conversation for another day, where now you need to bring your IT folks into the mix because of security and privacy and all these other things, processes and managing this stuff. But there's some best practices and disciplines they put in place that are very much needed. But it was all around, how can you do this yourself? And, with the extensibility, doing it yourself, right? One click, I can install something. Like it or not, yes, there's problems, but there's plenty of opportunities where you could one click, integration into your solution, and now you've got this new capability available to you. Versus you need to go call a salesperson and then either buy a new module, or have a service professional services team or a group or a consultant come in and take care of that. He's trying to eliminate that. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different little factors in there where people, and this is part of the reason why I think this gap is going to continue to widen post-COVID, because a lot of people are going to want to do things on budget, in a very small budget themselves. And this ability to teach yourself how to do this, have a community to ask, be able to develop put these things together yourself and sign up on your own without actually talking to a salesperson.
Yeah, that's going to be big. But I'll just say Oracle, they talk a lot about customer at cloud, for bigger enterprises, like you said, that want to be able to manage from maybe it's a regulatory or just, a security and privacy perspective.
Right.
If you're that big, maybe you do need to have a little bit more of it under your control. Try to have the benefits of both the cloud and also having it housed under, behind your firewall. So, wow, that's a lot to get, the take in and dig into, which we did in an unbelievable amount of time, man. This has been great. Yeah. What are you looking for? What do you want to look out for, maybe for the next 3 to 6 months? I want to keep it short, because hopefully by then, maybe by the time we get to that 6 month, hopefully things are getting better and not getting worse.
I think it's going to be interesting to see how, if things calm down COVID wise, what's the in-person interaction going to look like? Say, for instance, in the retail space, does McDonald's really need as big of a parking lot and as much dining room space? Or are people going to change the way they do things? I know that's a little off the beaten path, but that's been on my mind, being a consumer for the last, just playing consumer for a while, is just appreciating the things that may not necessarily need to be in the future. So does that change the way that logistics happen? Does that change the way that we serve? Uber just bought Postmates, so does that change how delivery and the last mile is being taken care of? But yeah, I think I'm interested to see how retail and hospitality, less hospitality, more retail, how it plays out. Does Amazon eat the world, or do we see different experiences because people are tired of working from home or being at home all the time and ready to engage in that lifestyle? So we'll have a shift back, and then what will the new normal be? Because there's going to be another not new normal when COVID calms down, and then we're going to have the new normal again. It's kind of like a thermostat where you basically go in a big room and it's super cold when you get in there. Someone changes the temperature, then it gets super hot because all the people are in there, and then you kind of go back and forth. There's an effect for that. And I think we're going to see a little bit of that as well. So the next 3-6 months, assuming COVID, it's going to be tough, but assuming COVID does, is managed in some way, I'm interested to see how the retail space will pan out, and not just the bankruptcies and the acquisitions, but how do we change the way that we shop? How do we change the way that we do our daily activities, like go to the grocery store, and need medical supply, medical attention, and education. That's a whole nother topic for another day. But how's that going to change coming in the fall with a lot of school, with a lot of kids who are asking to pay full tuition for a virtual session. What's the value then to being at college, and how does that change that conversation? Which means how do we learn is going to change over time as well. Sorry, I threw like 3 things in there.
Dude, that's all right. Dude, you're looking at a lot of things. That's okay. I asked you.
It's just all like we're all experiencing this. This is crazy, right? I mean, you can't just think about one thing. Each of us, I have to empathize with everybody about that, and we both do. So,
absolutely. Hey, this has been great. Now, let me just do a special thank you to Rolf, because dude was not only commenting in English, he was commenting in German. I was like, I don't even know what he's saying, so I couldn't pop it up. But I appreciate you doing that. And I actually appreciate everybody for all the great comments. And of course, I definitely appreciate Anand for taking time for doing this. And definitely we will be doing this again, because things are changing real quick, man. I definitely need somebody to talk to about this stuff.
It's my pleasure, Brent. I love that you've been just on top of, everybody should be following Brent. I mean, don't worry about me. Just go follow Brent. Listen to what he has to say. People he's bringing on. I mean, seriously, it's going to be, he's right. I mean, you're right. There's a lot of change that's going to happen, and it'll be great to stay on top of it. So look forward to doing this again. And thanks everybody for bringing in your thoughts and thoughtful comments and insights.
Absolutely. And just to think, this is just Monday. I mean, I got to be here for like another 4 days in a row, because literally I got stuff. Tomorrow is with Dennis Pombrant, and he just did some great research. Wednesday, of course, I'm with the bold one, the cold one, John Colder Ice Lawson, for Watching Amazon. And then Thursday and Friday, you know what it is. It's CRM Players. It's Paul Greenberg. And I think this week we've got our one of our players in residence, Nicole France from Constellation.
Excellent.
It's going to be fun. I mean, it's going to be good stuff. So thanks again for checking it out today. And hopefully I'll see you tomorrow.